Your life didn't fall apart in a single day, but it can start changing today. What destroyed you wasn't just what happened, but everything you kept carrying afterward. The guilt, the nostalgia, the fear of starting over. And if you're here, it's because something inside you is tired of merely surviving among the ruins and wants finally to rebuild from zero. You don't need anyone to save you. What you need is to remember that the power to rise was never taken from you. You just forgot it amid all the noise. You've spent so much time trying to make the past look like it used to that you didn't notice it no longer exists. And that, far from being a tragedy, is your greatest opportunity. Because only those who accept that everything has changed can truly begin to rebuild. Most people don't collapse because of what happens to them, but because of what they refuse to let go. They cling to people who have already left, to versions of themselves that no longer exist, to dreams that expired years ago. They live trapped in a kind of emotional museum, staring at memories they can no longer touch. And meanwhile, life keeps moving, waiting for them to wake up and start building something new from what remains. Seneca wrote, "He who suffers before it is necessary, suffers more than necessary." You've suffered too much for what was, for what you lost, for what you can't understand. But that suffering can transform. It can become discipline, clarity, temperance. You just need to learn how to direct it. And that's where Stoicism comes in, not as a philosophical theory, but as a living tool for the days when even breathing feels heavy. Rebuilding isn't about romanticizing pain. It's not about repeating "this too shall pass" while waiting for time to heal what you don't dare face. Rebuilding is looking in the mirror and accepting with brutal honesty that nothing will ever be the same and still choosing to move forward. It's understanding that the past has already fulfilled its purpose and that the only thing truly yours is what you choose to do today. That is the deepest Stoic lesson, that life owes you nothing, but you owe yourself the strength to begin again. Every time you think, "I can't take it anymore," remember it's not the end, it's the edge where a different version of you begins. The ground you stand on isn't punishment, it's foundation. Because only when you fall so low that you can't pretend anymore do you finally understand what truly matters: your mind, your serenity, your ability to act with virtue, even when everything around you has collapsed. That's what no one can take from you. Marcus Aurelius said, "Stop wasting time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." Maybe you've spent too long waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect environment, the perfect sign to start over. But the truth is, that moment is this one. Here, in the midst of chaos, exhaustion, and fear, this is where the soul is trained. Not when everything is calm, but when every part of you screams that you can't go on, and yet you take one more step anyway. Stoicism will never ask you not to feel. It will ask you not to become enslaved by what you feel. To understand that pain can coexist with action, that fear doesn't vanish, but it can obey you. That the past can't be erased, but it can stop weighing you down. And when you learn that, when you understand that life doesn't need to be perfect to be meaningful, something inside you realigns. You're not here to forget what broke you, but to learn how to use it. Every loss you've endured was training. Every silence you've survived was a reminder that your worth depends on no one. Every failure was preparing you for this version of yourself, the one that no longer begs, no longer fears, no longer depends on what's gone. That's the freedom born from accepting reality as it is, without decoration, without excuses, without masks. Repairing your life isn't about returning to the starting point. It's about building a different life with the fragments that survived. It's not about erasing what hurt, but about turning it into wisdom. Not about becoming who you were, but about creating someone steadier, calmer, more conscious. Someone who, when looking back, doesn't see ruins but a story of reconstruction. And that process begins with a decision. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. It begins today with one thought. From now on, I no longer define myself by what I lost, but by what I choose to do with it. That sentence could change everything, because the moment you believe it, you take back the power that pain once stole from you. This session isn't a list of tips or a motivational speech. It's a practical guide to remind you, step by step, that the essential is never lost. That virtue remains intact, even beneath the rubble. That within you still lives a serene strength, waiting for you to call it by its name. Self-mastery. So as you listen, don't rush the lesson. Breathe. Release. Listen. Every word that follows is a tool, one you can use when fear wakes you, when anxiety overwhelms you, when it feels like there's no way out, because there is. There always is. What was destroyed did not destroy you. It transformed you. And if you can understand that, if you can see pain as a door instead of a wall, you'll discover the greatest Stoic secret of all. That nothing can break you as long as you keep choosing to rebuild. Before we begin, I want you to declare your commitment by leaving this in the comments. From today, I begin to rebuild myself without looking back. That phrase will mark the beginning of your change. Because you can't keep waiting for life to return. What's gone now, it's your turn to build with what remains. You don't need everything to be, in order to start, only the courage to take one step. Every word you hear today will be another stone on this new path. It's time to prove to yourself that you can rise again, not the same, but wiser, stronger, more you. Without further ado, let's begin. First Stoic secret. Accept that what's broken will never be the same. There are wounds that never close, they just learn not to hurt. And that's the truth most people find hardest to face. The past cannot be fixed. The relationships that ended, the opportunities that slipped away, the versions of yourself that no longer exist, they belong to a time that's gone. Accepting that isn't resignation, it's maturity. Because as long as you keep fighting to recover what has already ended, you'll be living in conflict with reality. Marcus Aurelius wrote that, "The universe is change, and life is opinion." What he meant was simple and brutal. Nothing remains the same, only our mind insists it should. And that insistence is the root of suffering. When something breaks, the mind clings to the memory of what it was, creates ghosts of what could have been, and turns the present into a prison. But if you learn to look at what's broken without demanding that it be repaired, something extraordinary happens. Pain turns into understanding. Accepting that something has ended doesn't mean it was meaningless. Everything that was, even what hurt, brought you here. And if you think calmly, you'll understand that it's not about erasing the past, but learning to live with it without letting it rule you. That's the essence of this first secret. Don't try to rebuild what collapsed in its old form, because what you truly need will be born in another way, with another light, with another truth. Human beings have a dangerous obsession with becoming who they were before. But no one returns from a fire the same. Fire leaves marks, yes, but it also purifies. If life burned you, it wasn't to destroy you. It was to reveal what could withstand the flames. That is your essence, what remains when everything else is gone. And that part of you doesn't need to be restored. It needs to be recognized. Seneca said that the wise man does not grieve losses because he understands that nothing truly belongs to him except his virtue. If you lose something and feel like the world has ended, it's because you've confused possession with meaning. Meaning doesn't depend on what you have, but on what you do with what remains. You can lose a home, a love, a project, an identity, and still keep what matters most. your ability to respond to adversity with serenity. Look around you. Maybe the people who once stood beside you are gone. Maybe your life looks unrecognizable, but that doesn't mean it's empty. The space left by what's gone is the ground where the new will grow. And that ground is still fertile if you work it patiently. The mistake is trying to plant the same seeds and expecting a different harvest. What's broken doesn't get fixed, it gets reinvented. Reconstruction begins the day you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What can I do with this now?" That question changes everything, because it takes you out of the role of the victim and gives you back control. You're no longer waiting for something to repair you. You're choosing how to use what you have to move forward. And that shift in perspective is, in itself, a quiet victory. Sometimes we think acceptance is coldness, that if we stop suffering, it means we no longer care. But it's the opposite. Acceptance is love without demand. It's understanding without drama. It's realizing that life isn't here to please you, but to teach you. And when you truly accept that, the pain doesn't disappear completely, but it loses the power to dictate every thought. Maybe today you still look back with nostalgia, with that ache that remembers what once felt like home. But even that can be an act of gratitude. Be grateful for what was, even if it hurts. Be grateful for what you lost, because it shaped you. And be grateful for what remains, because that's where you'll rebuild from. No rebirth is clean. There are always scars, always fragments of history that stay with you. But those fragments give you depth. No one is reborn the same, and that's the beauty of the process. Loss forces you to decide who you want to become after it. The soul that clings to what was withers, but the one that dares to let go blooms among the dust. That's the paradox of rebuilding. Only when you release what you love do you realize it wasn't love that was leaving only the form. And what's essential, your ability to love, to trust, to begin again, has always remained intact. It's the world that changes, not your essence. Each day, repeat this truth to yourself. I no longer seek to go back. I seek to move forward with peace. Make it your mantra. Write it down if you must. Because every time you repeat it, you remind your mind that there's no mistake in having lost. That the ruins are not a failure, but the stage where strength begins. You don't need to close every wound. Some must stay open so the light can enter. Don't fear the emptiness left by what's gone. That emptiness is not absence, it's space. Space for something new, something more aligned with who you are, to take place. Acceptance is that silent act in which you stop pushing against the current and allow the river to carry you somewhere new. In a world that glorifies control, acceptance looks like surrender. But the Stoics knew the truth. There is no greater power than serenity before the inevitable. It's not passivity, it's spiritual intelligence. It's knowing when to act and when to let go. And that balance can only be found once you stop fighting what has already been decided by the very nature of things. Think of the tree that loses its leaves each winter. It doesn't mourn, doesn't try to glue the fallen leaves back to its branches. It waits. And when the time comes, it blooms again. That is the law of the cosmos, and it's also yours. Every loss has its purpose, every ending, its lesson. The task of the wise is to understand that what breaks doesn't mark the end, but the beginning of a new way of being. So when nostalgia touches your chest again, when an image, a memory, or a name revives what's no longer there, don't run from that feeling. Breathe it in, thank it, and then let it go. Because acceptance isn't forgetting, it's honoring what was without turning it into a prison. Only then will you be able to look forward without fear, with the calm of someone who knows that what's essential never breaks. Life doesn't ask you to be indestructible, it asks you to be flexible, to bend, to adapt, to flow. What hurts today will become wisdom tomorrow. What weighs you down now will become momentum later. And if you learn to look at your ruins through Stoic eyes, you'll see that you're not at the end of your story, but at its most valuable part, the one where you finally become your own architect. Second Stoic secret: start with what you can control. There are days when everything feels out of place. You try to move forward, but life feels like a chessboard someone else is playing. You put in effort, but the outcome doesn't depend on you. Then comes desperation, that knot in your chest that screams you can't go on, that everything is slipping from your hands. But the truth, the most liberating of all, is that you never had total control, and you don't need it. Epictetus, a slave turned philosopher, taught that freedom doesn't mean doing whatever you want, but mastering what depends on you. Everything else, the opinions of others, circumstances, luck, even love, belongs to the realm of the uncontrollable. When you try to rule the external, you live frustrated. But when you rule your mind, the world stops being a threat and becomes a stage. Pause for a moment and think, how often does your anxiety come from trying to change what doesn't belong to you? You expect to be understood, to be valued, for life to be fair, for results to match your effort. And when that doesn't happen, you feel like you've failed. But failure doesn't lie in the outcome, it lies in the confusion of believing the external defines your power. True power, the only one no one can take from you, is your ability to choose your attitude toward what happens. The anxious mind wants control because it's afraid of rejection, of chaos, of the void. And fear creates illusions that if you think enough, if you plan for everything, you can avoid pain. But pain, like rain, isn't avoided by holding the umbrella of thought, it's endured by learning to get wet with serenity. Absolute control is the great lie of the ego, and as long as you keep trying to manage every detail, you'll live as a slave to the outcome. Seneca summed it up in one line: "It's not that we have little time, but that we waste much." What's wasted isn't only physical time, but mental energy on what's beyond your domain. You drain yourself trying to change what doesn't respond to your will, instead of strengthening what does: your judgment, your reaction, your calm. That's where reconstruction begins. Not when the world is in order, but when you choose to bring order within the disorder. Each morning, you can ask yourself a Stoic question: what depends on me today? If you answer honestly, you'll find the list is short but powerful. It depends on you whether you get out of bed or stay there. It depends on you whether you respond with anger or with composure. It depends on you whether you keep feeding destructive thoughts or interrupt them. It depends on you whether you act with virtue, even when no one notices. Nothing more. And the curious thing is, when you focus your energy on those few things, everything else begins to flow effortlessly. Imagine a sailor in the middle of a storm. He can't control the wind, or the sea, or the fate of the ship, but he can adjust the sails. That's Stoicism, learning to adjust your sails instead of cursing the storm. And that small act, that simple shift in focus, can be the difference between shipwreck and progress. When you focus on what you can control, you recover a peace that no one else can give you. External noise loses its power over you. Criticism, setbacks, delays, none of them shake you anymore, because you understand that the world isn't conspiring against you, it's simply happening, and your task isn't to resist it, but to navigate it with virtue. Many mistake acceptance for passivity. They think accepting what you can't control means giving up. But acceptance isn't surrender, it's consciously choosing your battles. It's saying, I won't fight the rain, I'll build a roof. It's the difference between someone who curses reality and someone who uses it to grow. That's the practical wisdom the Stoics taught. Not that you should stop acting, but that you should act only where your action has power. Look at your life calmly. You'll see that most of your anguish comes from what you expect of others. You expect reciprocity, understanding, fairness, recognition, and when they don't come, you break. But if you redirect that energy toward what does depend on you, your effort, your integrity, your presence, everything changes. Not because the world becomes fairer, but because you become freer. And that inner freedom is the beginning of all reconstruction. Epictetus explained it with a perfect metaphor. Life is like a play. It's not about choosing the role, but performing well the one you've been given. That doesn't mean resignation, it means mastery. If your role is a difficult one, a loss, a disappointment, a fall, play it with virtue. Do it with calm, with composure, with dignity, because your performance depends on you, but the script doesn't. And if you play your part well, life itself will take care of the rest. Every time you feel like you're losing control, remember this truth. You're not losing control, you're remembering you never had it. And paradoxically, that's the moment when you regain your greatest power, because you stop trying to change the wind and start steering the helm. That's the difference between the one who drowns and the one who moves forward with the current. Make this secret a daily practice. Every time anxiety tries to take over, pause and say silently, "This doesn't depend on me." Repeat it with firmness. Feel the weight of the useless dissolve. Then add, "But this does depend on me." And act from there, from the concrete, from what you can actually do, no matter how small. One conscious action is worth more than 1,000 chaotic thoughts. The outer world is chaotic, unpredictable, and often unfair. But your inner world can be a refuge, and that refuge isn't built with control, but with clarity. You can't stop the storm, but you can avoid being swept away by it. That's the true art of self-mastery, staying calm while everything spins around you. Seneca said, "No wind is favorable to the one who doesn't know to which port he sails." Define your port. Serenity, balance, virtue. And even if the wind shifts, even if the waves crash, you'll know where to steer. That inner certainty is worth more than any outcome. That's how rebuilding begins. Not by fighting what you can't change, but by strengthening what depends on you. That's the foundation of every rebirth. And when you master it, you'll realize you don't need the world to be perfect to be at peace. You only need to govern your mind, and then, even when everything around you trembles, you'll remain steady. Third Stoic secret. Make discipline your new refuge. When everything falls apart, the mind looks for shelter. Some run toward noise, others toward the past, others toward distraction. But the Stoic doesn't seek anesthesia, he seeks structure. Because when the world becomes chaotic, discipline becomes his home. There's an uncomfortable truth most people avoid. You won't heal by inspiration, you'll heal by habit. Rebuilding doesn't come from the desire to change, but from the daily commitment to actions that reorder you from within. Pain fragments you, routine restores you. It's not a poetic idea, it's a mental law. And those who don't understand it remain trapped in the eternal cycle of trying and giving up. Seneca knew it well. Consistency is the greatest of virtues, because without it, none of the others can endure. You can have faith, purpose, talent, even hope, but without consistency, everything dissolves. Discipline isn't punishment, it's a form of self-love. It's how you prove to your mind that you're present, that you won't abandon it to chaos. It's the silent proof that even when you're broken, you still choose order. Many confuse discipline with rigidity, as if it were a prison. But the true Stoic knows that discipline is the opposite, it's freedom, because when you have inner order, nothing external can rule you. When your days have direction, circumstances stop being an enemy. Discipline doesn't take away spontaneity, it takes away fragility. It teaches you to respond, not react. Look around you. We live in an era where distraction has become a form of refuge, but also of escape. People say they need rest, but what they really need is purpose. Hours lost to screens, scattered thoughts, days fading without leaving a mark. And behind all that, a quiet sense of emptiness. Discipline is the antidote to that dissolution of the soul, because it gives you direction when your mind drifts, and purpose when your spirit weakens. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do every act of your life as if it were your last." That is the essence of discipline, not to do much, but to do with presence. Every small conscious act, getting up on time, caring for your body, keeping your word, meditating, writing, breathing, is an affirmation of inner mastery. It doesn't matter if the world laughs at your rituals or if no one sees your effort. Discipline needs no witnesses. Its reward is the silence of a peaceful mind after doing what's right. The chaos of modern life constantly invites you to surrender to impulse, to eat when you're not hungry, to speak when you should stay silent, to seek validation when you could give yourself peace. Discipline breaks that cycle, not to deprive you, but to remind you that you decide. It's a practice of sovereignty. And when you embrace it, you feel something new. Power. Not the power to rule the world, but the power to rule yourself, the only one that truly matters. Each day you keep a promise to yourself. Even unseen, you strengthen your character. Each morning you rise despite fatigue. You train your mind not to depend on motivation. Each time you choose duty over excuse, you rebuild your life on solid ground. Discipline doesn't transform you overnight. It molds you in silence. And one day, without realizing it, you find yourself reacting with calm where you once shouted, moving forward where you once hesitated, following through where you once delayed. That's not magic, it's structure. Seneca also warned, "No wind is favorable to the one who doesn't know to which port he sails." Discipline is your rudder. Without it, any distraction will drift you off course. With it, even storms push you forward. The Stoic doesn't fear routine, he honors it, because he knows the soul needs structure just as the body needs nourishment. And that structure doesn't come from the world, it comes from conscious choice. It's not about turning your life into a list of tasks. It's about building an order that holds you when everything else trembles. Make your morning a ritual of clarity. Wake with purpose, not anxiety. Make your night a mindful closing. Give thanks for what went well and learn from what didn't. That small daily circle of reflection and action becomes your shield, and with time, you'll notice something extraordinary. Your peace no longer depends on what happens outside, but on what you practice within. Discipline, in its purest form, is a spiritual act. It's saying to the universe, "I can't control fate, but I can control my preparation." And that attitude changes everything. Because while others wait for motivation, you're already moving. While others complain, you build. And in that quiet constancy, the soul finds rest. Remember, discipline isn't the absence of emotion, it's the direction of energy. It doesn't repress, it redirects. And in that redirection, you find a peace that doesn't depend on outcomes. Effort stops being a burden and becomes rhythm, like a hammer striking stone again and again until the shape emerges. Discipline carves your character. When pain visits you, don't run. When doubt consumes you, don't stop. When your mind says, "I can't anymore," answer with a small but firm act. Get up, tidy your space, write one line, take a deep breath. That simple action is a declaration. I'm still here. I'm still choosing. Because the soul doesn't rebuild through grand gestures, but through small acts repeated with faith. That is true Stoic practice. And one day, when you look in the mirror and no longer see the fragility you once did, you'll understand it wasn't luck or time that saved you. It was your discipline. That quiet commitment to yourself, that constant effort without witnesses, that repetition of acts that, little by little, gave you back control. Discipline doesn't promise instant results. It promises inevitable transformation. And those who embrace it, even if they lose everything, never feel lost. Make discipline your new refuge. Because when the noise of the world fades, when uncertainty knocks again, it will be your structure, your routine, your constancy that keeps you standing. And in that moment, you'll understand that rebuilding isn't starting over. It's standing firm amid change without losing your center. That is the soul's true victory. Fourth, Stoic secret. Don't ask for a new beginning, create it. No one is coming to rescue you. That's the hardest truth to accept when life collapses. You wait for a sign, an opportunity, a person to push you to rise again. But time passes, and no one arrives. And then you realize sometimes through tears and rage that new beginnings aren't granted, they're built. Through decision, patience, and will. Stoicism doesn't promise you an easy destiny, it teaches you to forge one. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That means what stops you today, if faced with reason, becomes the starting point of your reconstruction. There are no miracles, only the inner stillness that lets you see the next step in the dark, and sometimes that step is small. So small it seems useless. But every great change begins with that tiny gesture. Getting up, breathing, tidying your space, choosing not to give up. The weary soul dreams of a reset button. It wants to forget what happened, erase the scars, start from zero. But there's no eraser for experience, and that, far from being a curse, is your greatest advantage. Because the new beginning you seek isn't outside you, it's in the way you choose to look at what you have now. What once was ruin can become foundation if you decide to build upon it. Seneca said, "The strong man doesn't wait for circumstances to change, he transforms them." And that's the key. Those who wait grow weary, those who act grow stronger. You can't control when calm will return, but you can choose not to waste the storm. Those who learn to work within chaos discover that reconstruction begins long before things improve. It begins the day you decide not to stay still. When your mind tells you, "I can't," answer not with a speech, but with an act. Do something, anything, but do it. Movement, even the smallest, dissolves paralysis. The Stoics knew this. Action is medicine for the soul, not because it guarantees success, but because it restores direction. And whoever has direction is no longer lost, even if the destination remains unseen. The problem for most people is that they want to feel before they act. They wait to have energy to start, motivation to move, hope to try. But motivation is unstable. It depends on mood, on environment, on approval. Virtue, however, needs no conditions. It acts even when there is no desire. The Stoic doesn't wait to feel good to act. He acts to feel at peace. That's the difference between asking and creating. If today you feel like you can't go on, start anyway. Not because it's easy, but because every act of discipline is a declaration. I'm still alive. I'm still choosing. And when you choose, even through small gestures, life responds. Not magically, but in sequence. Every virtuous action creates order. Every order brings clarity, and clarity opens paths. The universe moves for those who move, not for those who complain. Remember this. There's no such thing as starting from zero. Even on your worst days, you don't begin empty. You begin with what you've learned, with the wisdom of your mistakes, with the strength you didn't know you'd cultivated. Nothing is ever completely lost. Every fall leaves you a lesson, and every lesson becomes a tool. Life never takes without giving in return, though sometimes the gift comes disguised as loss. Your task is to uncover it. New beginnings don't arrive with fireworks. They begin in silence, in the invisible decision to try again without waiting for guarantees, in the daily gesture no one notices, in the anonymous act of perseverance. These are the seeds of rebirth. And when they grow, they no longer resemble the life you lost. They resemble the one waiting for you, if you're patient. Epictetus said, "No one is free who is not master of himself." You can't control when everything will align, but you can control your consistency. You can choose to do the right thing today, even if no one sees it. And that act of quiet coherence has more power than 1,000 empty promises. Because the force that builds a new beginning doesn't come from enthusiasm, it comes from serenity. The soul that learns to move forward without applause, without immediate results, without certainty, discovers a strength no external source can give. That's the essence of rebirth. To move not because you have faith in the future, but because you're committed to the present. Every day is a chance to create what you once asked for. And if you take that chance without complaint, without haste, the universe begins to organize itself around your effort. Don't ask for a new beginning. Create it with your habits, your thoughts, your temperance. Make every daily decision reflect the kind of life you want to build. You don't need to start with everything. You just need to start with something. And that something, when repeated with intention, becomes everything. When the soul stops asking for permission to begin again, something powerful happens. You regain authority over yourself. You no longer depend on forgiveness, on time, or on destiny. You are the one who grants yourself the chance. And in that silent act of inner autonomy, the world starts to turn in your favor again. Don't wait for signs. Be the sign. Don't ask for strength. Train it. Don't seek clarity. Create order. The new beginning you're waiting for won't come with the sunrise. It will be born the moment you decide to see the darkness differently. Because everything you dream of is already within you, waiting for you to stop looking at the sky and start walking. There's no greater mystery than that. Reconstruction is an act of humility and courage. Humility to accept what was, and courage to act without guarantees. You don't need to know how it will end. You just need to start today. Without witnesses, without noise, without permission. Just you, facing life, deciding to stop asking for miracles and start building them. And when you do, when you place your hands upon your destiny with serenity, you'll realize the universe never owed you anything, because everything you needed was always within you. Fifth Stoic secret: turn adversity into your teacher. There are pains that don't come to destroy you but to awaken you. But you only understand that once you stop resisting. At first, adversity feels like betrayal. It takes what you love, breaks what you thought was certain, and pushes you into places you swore you'd never be. And it hurts so much that your mind screams, your body tightens, and your soul wonders why. But if you manage to stay still in the middle of the chaos, if you don't flee immediately toward complaint or empty comfort, something happens. Adversity begins to speak to you. And its voice, though harsh, teaches more than 1,000 victories. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. For them, pain wasn't punishment or accident. It was training. Every blow was a disguised lesson, a reminder that virtue isn't forged in easy days but in impossible ones. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Fire tests gold, adversity tests man." There's no simpler, truer phrase. What burns refines. What scorches reveals what you're made of. Look at yourself without masks for a moment. How many of your strengths were born from pain? Patience, empathy, prudence, temperance, all of them bloom in hard soil. Those who've never suffered don't know restraint. Those who've never fallen don't know how to rise. Those who've never lost don't know gratitude. Adversity doesn't rob you, it reorganizes you. It forces you to see differently, to cut away the unnecessary, to recognize what's essential. And the essential, almost always, is within you. Epictetus, a slave before he was a sage, said, "Don't seek for things to happen as you wish, but wish for them to happen as they do, and your life will go smoothly." Not because he proposed resignation, but because he knew that resisting the inevitable is the most common form of self-destruction. Adversity doesn't disappear by denying it, but when you accept it as a teacher, it ceases to be an enemy. Every difficult situation becomes a mirror, showing you your limits, your fears, your attachments. And only by facing what hurts can you begin to master it. Seneca wrote, "No man is more miserable than one who has never faced adversity, because a soul without trial weakens, just as a body does without training. A comfortable life gives you pleasure. A hard one gives you power. And while no one chooses to suffer, the wise choose to learn from suffering, because they understand that pain, when used wisely, transforms into wisdom. And that wisdom is what allows you to move forward with less fear and more balance. There's a moment, that second between the blow and your reaction, when everything can change. There you decide whether pain will define you or strengthen you, whether you become a victim or a student. The Stoics didn't deny emotion, they observed it. They knew they couldn't avoid the wound, but they could choose their response. And that choice is the boundary between useless suffering and growth. Think of it this way: every time something goes wrong, life is asking for a higher version of you, calmer, more conscious, stronger. Adversity doesn't ask if you're ready, it trains you to be. And though it hurts, though it may seem unfair, the result of that trial is always evolution. No one walks out of an inner fire unchanged. It either consumes you or purifies you. The outcome depends on how you choose to look at the ashes. Many ask, "Why me?" But the wiser question is, what for? What for this pain, this loss, this change? That question doesn't seek comfort, it seeks meaning, and meaning transforms. Because when you find purpose in the wound, you stop bleeding in vain. Pain becomes direction, sadness becomes clarity. Suffering stops being punishment and becomes a path. The Stoics didn't want to escape pain, they wanted to transcend it. They knew you can't prevent life from hurting you, but you can prevent it from destroying you. And the difference lies in what you do with what happens to you. You can feed complaint, or you can strengthen your mind. You can search for someone to blame, or you can search for the lesson. The first keeps you stuck, the second sets you free. That simple, that difficult. Adversity doesn't discriminate, it comes for everyone. But not everyone uses it the same way. Some turn it into an excuse, others into a foundation. The Stoic belongs to the latter, not because he doesn't suffer, but because he uses suffering as a teacher. Every obstacle, every loss, every failure becomes material for growth. And when you understand this, life stops being frightening, because you know that even in pain, you can win. Imagine for a moment that what hurts today is the exact lesson your soul needed, not to punish you, but to shape you. Imagine that this blow didn't arrive by chance, but to teach you something only this way could. Maybe patience, maybe detachment, maybe self-respect. When you look at it that way, the wound changes form. It's no longer an enemy, but a mirror. And in that reflection, you begin to recognize yourself with greater truth. Epictetus insisted, "Circumstances don't make the man, they only reveal him." That means pain doesn't change you. It brings out what was already inside. Courage, serenity, dignity, they were always there, asleep, waiting for a trial to awaken them. And once awakened, nothing is the same, because now you know you can bear the unbearable. And that certainty can never be taken from you. Sometimes the hardest lesson adversity teaches is that no one will come to save you, but also the most liberating one, that you don't need them to. You have within you the power to rise, to reinvent yourself, to continue. Pain, used wisely, gives you back sovereignty over yourself. And that sovereignty is the root of true freedom. Marcus Aurelius summed up this principle in one idea. The obstacle is the way. It's not a metaphor, it's a way of life. The obstacle isn't there to stop you, but to transform you. And if you look at it with the right mind, even the worst day can become your greatest teacher, because what seems like a wall today will tomorrow become the base of your strength. Remember this: everything you survive belongs to you. Every scar is a certificate of growth. Every fall is an investment in experience. And every time you rise again, the universe bends slightly before your resilience. Not because you're invincible, but because you chose to learn instead of surrender. So the next time life strikes you, don't ask why. Ask, what can I do with this? And in that question begins your transformation. Because pain, when looked at with reason, ceases to be an enemy. It becomes the teacher your soul needed. And you, at last, become its best student. If something inside you felt relief hearing these words, follow that impulse and follow us. Subscribing isn't a favor to the podcast. It's an act of respect toward yourself. It means you refuse to just survive. You're ready to think differently, to feel more calmly, to live more intentionally. Do it now and share this message with whoever needs it. Because when one mind lights up, it inevitably illuminates another. Sixth Stoic secret: stop blaming and start building. Blaming is easy. It's the immediate escape when the wound is still bleeding and the soul can't find meaning. You point to others, to life, to the past, to fate. And for a moment, you feel relief. You're no longer the problem. But the relief doesn't last, because blame doesn't heal, it only delays. The energy you spend assigning fault is the same energy you could use to rebuild yourself. And while you waste it on what's gone, life keeps moving without you. The Stoic knows this. Blame is an anchor disguised as justice. It convinces you that by keeping your finger pointed, you're defending your dignity. But in truth, all you're doing is standing still, orbiting endlessly around what hurt you. Epictetus was blunt. It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. And blame is exactly that. An opinion that keeps you tied to the past. It's a way of reopening the wound every time you talk about it. The wise, instead, break the cycle. They accept, they understand, they act. Acceptance doesn't mean justifying the other. It means freeing your energy from repetition. It means refusing to live as if pain still had the right to rule your present. Because every time you blame, you hand power back to the one who hurt you. You remain bound, even if that person is long gone. You keep repeating their name in silence, even if the world has moved on. And that's not justice, that's emotional imprisonment. Seneca said, "The wise man seeks the cause in himself, Not because he's guilty of everything, but because he knows he can only act within his own domain. You can't change others' decisions or rewrite what's already happened, but you can change your interpretation, your reaction, your next step. And in that small territory of control, freedom begins. Blame looks backward, building looks forward. And the time you spend blaming could instead be used to build a new version of yourself. Look at your story honestly. How many times have you delayed your growth waiting for an apology that never came? How many times have you said, when he changes, when she understands, when they recognize me? And while you waited, life kept going without asking permission. The Stoic doesn't wait. He doesn't need the other to understand in order to heal. His reconciliation doesn't depend on the world, but on his own judgment. He knows that the highest justice isn't seeing the other suffer, it's moving forward yourself. Stopping blame isn't weakness, it's courage. It takes far more strength to look inward than to keep pointing outward. Because inside lie your shadows, your choices, your silences, your fears. And facing them demands humility. The humility to admit that, even if others hurt you, you also played a part, maybe by tolerating, maybe by staying silent, maybe by believing things would change without you changing. It's not about self-punishment, it's about understanding. And understanding is the first step toward power. The habit of blaming is addictive. It gives you identity, the betrayed one, the wronged one, the unlucky one. But every identity built on pain becomes a prison. A free soul doesn't need labels, it needs direction. And that direction begins the day you stop repeating the story and start writing a new one. Marcus Aurelius summed it up with a line worth tattooing on the mind. Do what is in your power, accept what is not, and endure what you must. That's all. Simple in words, immense in practice. When you stop blaming, something extraordinary happens. You regain time. The time you once wasted in circular conversations, obsessive thoughts, internal arguments. Suddenly there's silence, and in that silence, space to build. Because only those who release the past can shape the future. And building doesn't mean erasing what happened, it means transforming the meaning you give it. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's reinterpreting. It's not about absolving the other, but absolving yourself from carrying them any longer. Ask yourself, do you want to be right, or do you want to be at peace? Because rarely can you have both. Being right seeks winners. Peace seeks freedom. And the Stoics always chose freedom even when the world hurt them. Not because they were indifferent, but because they knew the human soul wasn't made to live, chained to resentment. When something hurts, don't ask who's to blame. Ask what you can learn. The first question keeps you stuck. The second makes you grow. Every failure can be a school if you face it with serenity. Every disappointment can be a teacher if you listen without rage. And every mistake, even your own, can become wisdom if you dare to look at it without fear. The one who blames repeats. The one who learns transcends. And only those who transcend can build something that lasts. Because the energy that once fueled your complaints now becomes purpose. And that purpose, sustained day after day, eventually erases the traces of resentment. You no longer live to prove anything to anyone, you live to honor your own coherence. And that coherence, when maintained, rebuilds more than any apology ever could. Seneca wrote, "No man is lost except by his own fault." And though it sounds harsh, what he meant was simple. External loss doesn't destroy you if you preserve internal mastery. Losing love, a job, an opportunity, none of that erases you. What erases you is staying in the role of the one who was victimized by it. The wise accept loss, reorganize their mind, and move on, because they know life doesn't stop to mourn, only to teach. So stop blaming. Stop waiting for divine justice or human apologies. Both may come or not, but neither guarantees peace. Only you can grant it to yourself. Make your reconstruction a silent but unstoppable act. You don't need witnesses to validate your process, only honesty to sustain it. Each day you choose to build, you show the universe you've understood the lesson. And when you do, when you take total responsibility, not guilt but responsibility, the weight dissolves. Because the mature soul understands that control doesn't lie in changing what happened, but in deciding what to do with what remains. The next time your mind looks for someone to blame, stop, breathe, and say to yourself, this too depends on me. Not because everything is your fault, but because your attitude always is. That's where reconstruction begins, not in punishing the other, but in freeing yourself. That is the victory of the wise. They need no revenge, because they've already found purpose. And when there's purpose, the past loses power. 7th Stoic secret: guard your mind like a temple. Your mind is the place where you live, even when everything external changes. And yet, it's the space you neglect the most. You let in any thought, any worry, any noise, as if your mind were an open station for every train in the world. You set no filters, no schedules, no boundaries. And then you wonder why there's chaos. But tell me, what temple could withstand the constant entry of noise, complaints, comparisons, and judgments without collapsing? None. That's why the ancient sages said the mind must be cultivated with the same care given to a sacred garden, because what you allow to grow inside it eventually shapes your destiny. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The life of man is what his thoughts make of it." And he was right. Your experience doesn't depend so much on what happens outside, but on how you interpret what happens within. If you allow your mind to become a landfill of fears, complaints, and resentments, your life becomes a reflection of that pollution. But if you learn to cleanse it, to organize it, to nourish it with thoughts of virtue and serenity, everything changes. Because it's not about ignoring reality, but about building a mind strong enough not to be swept away by it. The soul wears down when constantly exposed to noise. And today, we live surrounded by noise disguised as information. Social media, meaningless conversations, fear-driven news, opinions disguised as truths. Your mind, defenseless, absorbs it all. And without realizing it, you lose clarity, you lose calm, you lose focus, you become a guest inside your own temple. The Stoic, on the other hand, carefully chooses which thoughts dwell in his mind, not out of arrogance, but out of spiritual hygiene, because he knows that what he thinks throughout the day builds the state in which he'll sleep at night. Seneca put it precisely, "No wind is favorable to the one who doesn't know to which port he is sailing." And the mind, without direction, is like a ship adrift. Any current carries it away. That's why the wise begin each morning with a reflection. What thoughts do I want to keep today? What emotions no longer serve me? What stories must I let go of? That small exercise, repeated with consistency, changes lives. It's not magic, it's method. Because a disciplined mind is the foundation of lasting peace. Caring for the mind doesn't mean thinking positively. It means thinking wisely. Stoic thought doesn't seek to deny hardship. It seeks to interpret it in a way that doesn't destroy you. When the mind is ordered, the soul strengthens. And that strength doesn't shout or boast. It's felt in your tone, in your posture, in your serenity. It's that calm that unsettles those who live in noise, because they can't understand how you remain still in the midst of chaos. But it isn't inherited calm, it's trained calm. And the training begins by guarding what you let in. The wise don't argue with everyone, don't respond to everything, don't expose themselves to everything. not because they don't care about the world, but because they know their peace isn't infinite. It has value, and like all that's valuable, it must be protected. Your mind deserves that same respect. You can't let just anyone invade it with their shadow. Every conversation you accept, every piece of content you consume, every thought you repeat leaves a trace. And those traces, over time, become paths your mind walks on its own. If those paths are full of fear, you'll live on alert. If they're full of virtue, you'll walk in peace. Epictetus taught that the soul must guard its perceptions like a watchman guards the entrance to a temple. You can't stop someone from knocking at the door, but you can decide whether to let them in. Not all thoughts deserve lodging. Some come only to soil. That's why before feeding an idea, ask yourself, does it bring me closer to serenity or further away? Does it strengthen me or drain me? If the answer is negative, close the door. So simple, so profound. Caring for the mind also means rest. You can't build a temple out of ruins, nor think clearly when your body is exhausted. Fatigue doesn't just destroy energy, it destroys judgment. And weakened judgment turns every small discomfort into catastrophe. That's why rest isn't a luxury, it's discipline. The wise withdraw from the noise to rebuild their mind in silence. They don't flee the world, they reorder themselves to return with greater clarity. Silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the presence of attention. Sometimes caring for your mind means disappointing others, saying no to purposeless conversations, closing the door to connections that only drain energy, turning off screens to hear your own breath. And though it may seem selfish, it's an act of respect, because those who don't care for their minds can't care for anything else. They can't love deeply, work with focus, or live with fullness. Everything noble is born from a mind in order. Remember, the mind isn't filled, it's cultivated. And to cultivate is a patient verb. There's no hurry in inner growth. There's attention, constancy, even tenderness. The mind, when treated with gentleness and discipline, blooms. It begins to produce useful, sober, virtuous thoughts. And those thoughts, in turn, generate serene emotions and wise decisions. Everything is connected. Everything begins in that invisible space we call thought. Every time you think you don't have time for yourself, remember this: if you don't, someone else will occupy your mind for you. The world is full of voices trying to rent your attention. Advertising, promises, news, comparisons, each one sells you a version of who you should be. And if your mind isn't firm, you'll end up being the sum of all those voices. That's why the wise consciously choose what to think, what to believe, what to focus on. Not because they're cold, but because they understand their mind is sacred. And what is sacred isn't shared with just anyone. Guard your mind like a temple. Cleanse it of foreign thoughts, of old resentments, of inherited fears. Fill it with ideas that lift you, with readings that nourish you, with silences that bring you back to the present. Each day is a ceremony in that invisible temple, and you are its guardian, its priest, its builder. Don't delegate that task, because if you don't care for it, no one will. And losing your mind is losing everything, even when everything else seems intact. A serene soul isn't born by accident. It's built in silence, strengthened through observation, and sustained by discipline. Make your mind a place you're glad to stay in, because in the end, you'll live there all your life. And if you learn to inhabit it with order, serenity, and purpose, no external noise will ever bring you down. Peace isn't outside. It's in how you care for the most intimate space you have, your thought. 8th Stoic secret: surround yourself with what lifts you, not what distracts you. Your environment speaks, even when no one says a word. It speaks through gestures, through conversations, through uncomfortable silences, and through energies that can be felt but not seen. And often, without noticing, what surrounds you becomes an exact reflection of your inner state. That's why it's so easy to confuse comfort with belonging. You get used to the noise, the drama, the complaints, the emotional mediocrity, and you think that's normal. But it's not. It's just familiar. And the familiar, when it doesn't challenge you, dulls you. The Stoics knew that the soul is shaped by contact. Seneca wrote bluntly, "We become like those we associate with." And he was right. The people, the ideas, the places, and the habits you spend your time with are never neutral. Each leaves an invisible mark. They either pull you down to their level or invite you to rise to yours. So if you spend your days among those who complain, you'll end up complaining. If you live among those who blame, you'll end up searching for culprits. And if you live among those who doubt everything, soon you'll doubt yourself too. The mind is a sponge. It absorbs what surrounds it, even when you try to resist. Surround yourself with what elevates you. And to elevate doesn't mean isolating yourself from the world. It means learning to distinguish what adds and what subtracts. There are conversations that nourish and others that drain. There are environments that awaken purpose and others that anesthetize. The wise carefully choose where they invest their energy because they know energy isn't infinite. Every minute spent on the trivial is a minute stolen from the essential. And the essential virtue, calm, focus, gratitude, requires a clean space to grow. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by power, war, and fatal decisions, yet he insisted, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And those thoughts are born from the environment you allow. So, if you wish to rise, begin by observing what surrounds you. What do you consume? Who do you talk to? What do you give your attention to? Everything you feed eventually becomes your character. And your character, according to the Stoics, is your destiny. Surround yourself with books that make you think, not just distract you. Surround yourself with people who challenge you to improve, not those who applaud you for staying the same. Surround yourself with silence, even when it's uncomfortable, because there, the purest ideas are born. And surround yourself with nature, even for a few minutes, because it demands nothing and simply reminds you what you are. Part of a greater order that needs no human approval to exist. The soul breathes again when it moves away from noise, and without inner oxygen, the mind collapses into anxiety and superficiality. You cannot expect mental clarity while living in disorder. You cannot expect greatness while surrounded by voluntary smallness. And you cannot reach serenity if every stimulus around you feeds your restlessness. That's why protecting your environment isn't spiritual elitism, it's emotional survival. The wise don't need luxury, they need harmony. And harmony isn't bought, it's built. Through each daily choice. What you see, what you hear, what you tolerate. Epictetus taught that there is no progress without selection. He said that just as a sick body cannot digest every food, an untrained mind shouldn't expose itself to every influence. And he was right. Not everything the world offers deserves your attention. Some stimuli seem harmless, a negative comment, gossip disguised as concern, constant comparison, but they slowly erode your energy. They rob you quietly. And by the time you notice, you're already drained. That's why wisdom means detecting what drains you before it empties you completely. Surround yourself with people who talk about ideas, not about others. With those who listen without judgment, but also confront you when you stray from your values. With those who aren't threatened by your growth, because they understand your light doesn't overshadow, it inspires. The soul doesn't need crowds, it needs resonance. One virtuous presence is worth more than 100 empty ones. The wise choose quality over quantity, silence over noise, depth over appearance, because they know their environment is a living reflection of their mind, and no growth can take root in contaminated soil. Sometimes, to elevate yourself, you'll have to be alone for a while. And that's okay. Solitude, in its mature form, isn't isolation, it's purification. It's the process where the soul cleanses itself of external voices and begins to hear its own again. There, in that quiet space, is where true decisions are born, the ones not made out of fear or impulse, but out of coherence. Solitude isn't punishment, it's sanctuary, and those who learn to use it stop fearing it. Caring for your environment doesn't mean closing yourself off from the world. It means opening yourself with awareness. Choosing what deserves to enter your mental space is an act of wisdom, because the soul, like the body, feeds, and if you feed it noise, it will grow in chaos. But if you feed it virtue, it will bloom in serenity. So simple, so difficult. The modern world taught you to be connected all the time, but it didn't tell you the cost. Every shallow connection disconnects you from yourself. And inner silence, once natural, is now a luxury few remember to cultivate. Reclaim that luxury. Seek places where you can breathe without expectation, people with whom you have nothing to prove, activities that don't agitate but center you. That too is success. Because true greatness isn't measured by what you achieve, but by the peace with which you achieve it. And that peace depends, largely, on what and whom you choose to share your time with. Never underestimate the power of your environment. The Stoics knew, no mind can endure long-term if its surroundings conspire against it. That's why, even as they practiced inner strength, they were careful with external influence. They knew that the human mind, no matter how trained, remains porous, and what enters will eventually leave its mark. So if you want to be free, start by cleansing the space where your soul breathes. Surround yourself with what reminds you who you are when you forget your worth, with what makes you think deeper, feel more honestly, act more virtuously, with what awakens your gratitude, your purpose, your sense of belonging to the cosmos. Surround yourself with what restores your calm when the world shakes you. And when you can't find it outside, remember it's within. You yourself can be that environment. A clear mind, a peaceful heart, an awakened conscience that too elevates. In the end, the true Stoic choice isn't between pleasure and pain, but between distraction and purpose. And whoever chooses purpose inevitably also chooses silence, quality, introspection, because a soul that seeks to grow cannot bloom in noisy soil. So choose wisely. Choose what expands you, what centers you, what reminds you of the essential, because everything else what drains, agitates and confuses exists only to distract you from the path. And the path, if you pay attention, always leads you back to yourself. Ninth Stoic secret: be patient with the process, but steadfast in your purpose. Impatience is a subtle form of hopelessness. It's born from the desire to see results before you've planted enough seeds, from the urge to control the timing of the universe, as if nature were obliged to obey our anxiety. But the cosmos never rushes, and yet everything fulfills its course. The tree doesn't bloom before its season, nor does the sun rise early to please anyone. And still, we insist on wanting to arrive sooner, heal sooner, grow sooner. We forget that real processes require time. Forced growth ends up breaking what was meant to mature. The wise understand this. Patience is not passivity, it's contained power. It's acting consistently without demanding guarantees. It's continuing to walk even when no fruit has appeared, trusting that the seed is doing its work underground, even when unseen. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Time is like a river. It sweeps away all that is born and carries it off with the same speed." And yet he wasn't speaking of resignation, but of rhythm, of learning to flow with the current without being carried away by it. Because the one who runs against the river exhausts himself, but the one who moves with it learns to guide his strength. Impatience convinces you that the value of your effort depends on immediate results, and that condemns you to frustration. Because the world doesn't always move at your rhythm, and progress isn't measured in days. Sometimes the deepest changes remain invisible for years. And meanwhile, everything seems the same. The soul that can't bear that slowness ends up quitting just before it blooms. That's why Stoicism teaches a lesson few can endure. What matters is not how fast you advance, but that you keep advancing with virtue. Purpose isn't a race, it's a direction. Seneca said, "Slowness with purpose is worth more than haste without meaning." And how true that is. We live in an era that glorifies speed and despises depth. We crave quick results, instant emotions, constant validation. But the soul doesn't work that way. The soul needs silence, repetition, discipline. Patience isn't a waste of time, it's how the universe measures your commitment. Because those who don't know how to wait won't know how to hold on when what they asked for finally arrives. Purpose, on the other hand, is the compass that keeps patience from turning into apathy. Patience without purpose is resignation. Purpose without patience is anxiety. Wisdom lies in balance. In understanding that you can move slowly without stopping, that you can rest without giving up, that you can trust without ceasing to act. That balance between firmness and calm is what the Stoics called ataraxia, serenity in motion, a state in which you don't obsess over results, but neither do you abandon them. Patience is a form of rational faith, faith in the cause and effect of the cosmos, faith in your silent labor, faith that what you sow today will sprout when its hour comes. Epictetus insisted, "Do not demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they must." That doesn't mean surrendering to chance. It means aligning yourself with natural order. The wise understand that the universe has its own calendar, and that the human ego is impatient because it fears losing control. But absolute control is an illusion. You can only control your virtue, your actions, your constancy. And that is enough. When you lose patience, observe your thoughts. Behind every frustration lies an unmet expectation, and behind every expectation, a belief about how things should be. Patience is dismantling that belief and replacing it with active acceptance. Telling yourself, "This isn't happening yet, and that's okay. Not yet, not never." That phrase changes the soul, because it frees you from urgency without sinking you into resignation. "Not yet" contains both hope and action. It's the language of the wise. The process is never linear. It will have advances, pauses, setbacks, and each teaches something. Falling teaches humility, stagnation teaches resilience, progress teaches gratitude, but only if you're willing to look without judgment. The impatient despair at detours, the wise see them as training. Because everything that repeats has a reason. If life keeps presenting the same obstacle, it's because you haven't yet learned the lesson it holds. And until you do, the path will keep showing you the same landscape under different faces. Patience is also accepting that not everyone moves at your rhythm. Sometimes you'll want to pull others along, and you won't be able to. Everyone has their own process, their own time to awaken. Trying to force it is as futile as yelling at a seed to bloom. Your task isn't to accelerate others, but to keep your own light burning. Patience with others is also wisdom. Because the impatient soul not only destroys itself, it drags along those it loves in its rush. When you understand this, you begin to notice that the best things in life grow slowly. Respect, trust, maturity, inner peace. None of these appear overnight. And if they do, they're probably false. Depth requires time. That's why those who despair live on the surface, and those who cultivate patience live rooted in depth. Don't confuse slowness with lack of progress. What looks still on the outside is often work happening invisibly within. The soil that seems inert is gestating life. The mind that seems quiet is integrating lessons. And the soul that seems tired is learning to release control. Every true process has a moment of darkness, that point where nothing seems to move, but everything is germinating. Right there is where the patient and the impulsive part ways, those who wait with faith, and those who abandon from frustration. Be steadfast in your purpose. Don't let impatience confuse it with fleeting fantasies. Each day, remind yourself why you began. Not to obsess, but to remember that meaning is worth more than speed. Because if you lose meaning, even if you arrive quickly, you'll arrive nowhere. And that emptiness weighs more than any delay. The Stoic purpose doesn't feed on external promises, but on inner conviction. Your purpose doesn't need applause or witnesses. It only needs coherence doing what's right, even when no one sees. That silent consistency is what separates the wise from the impulsive. Because the impulsive seek instant gratification, the wise seek lasting transformation. And every true transformation requires time, discipline, and serenity. When impatience strikes, pause, breathe deeply, and repeat to yourself, the process is part of the purpose. There is no destination without the path, no learning without delay. And if you make peace with time, you'll have conquered the greatest enemy, haste. Because haste destroys more dreams than failure. Those who fail, learn. Those who quit from impatience never even understand what they lost. The day you learn to move slowly without stopping, you'll have reached a kind of freedom. You'll no longer live chasing what cannot be rushed, nor mourning what hasn't yet arrived. You'll live in rhythm, in harmony with the natural pulse of the universe. And when that happens, there's no longer anxiety, only certainty. Certainty that each step, however small, is taking you exactly where you need to be. That is the patience of the wise. They don't wait for miracles, they walk with purpose. And in that constant walk, without noise, without haste, without pause, the universe always ends up responding. 10th Stoic secret: don't try to be the same, be better. There's a phrase many repeat after pain: I just want to be who I was before. And yet, that is the subtlest trap of suffering. Because before no longer exists. Before died the day life changed you. And to long for a return is to deny the evolution that pain came to provoke. You're not here to be the same. You're here to be wiser, steadier, more human. It's not about going back, it's about becoming someone who no longer needs to. The soul that has gone through loss, betrayal, or disappointment cannot and should not return intact. It must rebuild itself from its fragments, but differently, more conscious, more sober, more real. Suffering wasn't a mistake, it was a teacher. And a teacher demands transformation. Marcus Aurelius wrote with brutal clarity, "What stands in the way becomes the way." That means the blow didn't come to destroy you, it came to reshape you. Fire doesn't burn iron to consume it, but to strengthen it. And you, like iron, were also placed in the fire. But fire leaves marks, scars, memories, silences. And sometimes we believe those marks are signs of weakness. They're not. They're the map of what you survived. The visible proof that you kept going when everything in you wanted to give up. So when your mind whispers, "I want to be who I was before," answer calmly, "I don't need to be. Now I'm stronger, more aware, freer." The past can inspire you, but it can no longer inhabit you. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They knew that everything that happens, even pain, has a place in the cosmic order. That what seems like loss is often purification. And that true strength lies not in remaining the same, but in transforming without losing your essence. Seneca said it precisely, "Nothing except reason endures. Everything else, the body, relationships, circumstances, changes. Resisting change is like fighting the sea. You end up exhausted and soaked in frustration. Accepting it, on the other hand, is learning to swim. And those who learn to swim no longer fear the waves. Don't try to go back. Don't cling to before as if salvation were there. Nothing of who you were has been entirely lost. The essential remains with you. But now it's different. Now you know the worth of your calm, the pain of seeking approval, the weight of carrying what no longer belongs to you. That wisdom didn't exist before. That's why the you of today, though tired, is more authentic than yesterday's. The soul that falls and rises doesn't return to the starting point. It rises above it. And that ascent isn't seen in words. It's felt in the serenity with which you now face what once disturbed you. Epictetus taught that what matters is not what happens to you, but how you respond. That response, not the events, defines who you are. If your first reaction to pain was anger, you were human. If it was resignation, you were vulnerable. But if after the tears you chose to learn, then you were wise. Because wisdom doesn't erase pain, it gives it meaning. And giving it meaning is what makes you new. Many lie chained to nostalgia, as if the past were a safe refuge. But nostalgia is resistance to the present. It makes you idealize what was, forget what you learned, and despise what you have. The wise don't look back with longing, but with gratitude. They're thankful for everything lived, even the hard parts, because without them there would be no depth. Pain wasn't the enemy, it was the sculptor. And what you are today is its most recent work, unfinished, yes, but stronger than ever. Letting go of wanting to be the same is accepting impermanence. Accepting that everything changes, that nothing is fixed, that life's current doesn't stop for anyone. And that's not pessimism, it's liberation. Because once you understand that nothing is meant to stay, you stop suffering over what leaves. You become an observer of change, not its victim. And then pain stops being punishment and becomes passage. The person you were before your losses couldn't possibly understand the person you are now, and that's okay. You won't see, trust, or feel the same way again. But now your bonds will be more conscious, your boundaries clearer, your expectations more human. That, too, is progress. Because the goal was never to remain intact, but to learn to live wisely amid uncertainty. Seneca, in one of his letters to Lucilius, wrote, "The strong man is not the one who never falls, but the one who rises better each time. That better is the essence of this secret. Not the same, not as before, better. And better doesn't mean happier, more successful, or more admired. It means more, at peace with the inevitable, more in control of yourself, more aware of how little you truly need. That inner maturity doesn't come without wounds. And those wounds, when looked at with gratitude, stop hurting and start teaching. Ask yourself, do you truly want to be who you were before the pain? Or do you want to be the one who now understands the value of silence, calm, and simplicity? If your answer is the second, then you're already on the right path. the path of those who don't flee from change but turn it into destiny. Because the wise don't seek to return to their former form, they rebuild into a new one, and in that rebuilding, the fire of pain becomes the light of awareness. Don't compare yourself to your past self. Compare yourself to your sleeping self, the one who chased what wasn't his, who lived to please, who confused love with dependence. Look at him with tenderness, not contempt. He did the best he could with the consciousness he had. But now you know more, and knowing more demands living better. You can't remain the same after seeing what you've seen, feeling what you've felt, and understanding what you've understood. Growth doesn't ask for permission, so don't want to be you again. Be new every day. Allow yourself to change without guilt, to evolve without fear, to walk away without resentment. Let go of the version of you that has already fulfilled its purpose. That version may have been naive, impulsive, dependent. Don't judge it, thank it. Because thanks to it, you are here. More aware, wiser, more yourself than ever. And remember this, what you lost doesn't define what you'll become. What you do with what you lost that does. You can stand staring at the ruins of what was, or you can begin building with what remains. That choice separates the one who survives from the one who is reborn. The first fears change, the second uses it as fuel. And if you choose to be the second, you'll discover a truth that liberates. It's not about reclaiming the life you had, but creating one worthy of who you're becoming. Don't try to go back. Move forward. Calmly, steadily, with faith in the process. Because if the universe stripped something from you, it wasn't punishment, it was redirection. Everything that breaks shows you what you're made of. And if your response to that fracture is virtue, then you've already won. Reconstruction doesn't end when you become who you were. It ends when you become who you were meant to be. Thus the Stoics conclude, with acceptance and purpose. Because the one who accepts transformation stops demanding explanations from fate and begins to collaborate with it. Don't try to be the same. Be better, more serene, more just, more free. And when the world asks how you manage to rise again, smile. Because the answer isn't in words, but in the tranquil way you now walk. Rebirth without looking back. When everything collapses, you believe you've lost it all, but what you truly lose is the illusion of control. And there, right in that crack, truth begins. Because reconstruction doesn't start when you recover what you lost. It starts when you stop needing it to feel whole. That's the point where the soul, tired of pretending to be strong, finally surrenders. And that surrender, far from being defeat, is the first act of wisdom. You've walked among ashes. You've felt your plans, your certainties, your connections crumble. And yet you're still here, breathing, with scars that ache, yes, but that also shine with a strange kind of dignity, because every wound that didn't destroy you shaped you, and every loss that took something away left space for something more. Pain changed you, but it didn't empty you. It emptied you of the superficial to fill you with the essential. Sometimes life takes away what you thought was indispensable just so you can discover what truly matters. It tears away what was certain to teach you that certainty doesn't exist. It leaves you alone so that you can understand that the most important company is the one you build within yourself. And that is the beginning of reconstruction. When you realize you don't need to return to who you were because you're meant to become someone different, someone more grounded, more aware, more real. The Stoics didn't seek to escape pain. They contemplated it as part of the natural order. They knew that resisting it only prolonged its rule. Marcus Aurelius summed it up calmly. Welcome whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny. Acceptance is not surrender. Acceptance is looking at chaos and saying, "This too is mine, and I will make it part of my path." That is the silent strength of someone who no longer fights the universe but cooperates with it. When you rebuild your life, the greatest danger isn't pain, it's haste. The urge to prove that you're fine now, that you've healed, that you've moved on. But true healing has no witnesses. It happens in the intimacy of your thoughts, in the nights when you choose not to give up, in the days when you choose serenity over revenge. It happens when you stop explaining your pain and start transforming it into purpose. That's where the soul realigns quietly, without applause, without drama, only with consistency, humility, and virtue. Rebuilding isn't starting from zero, it's starting with awareness, because there's no going back, and that's a gift. The past, with all its wounds, has already done its work. It showed you what to release, what to learn, what to understand. Now it's time to live differently, without masks, without urgency, without fear of losing. Because those who have lost the essential and still gone on become invincible. Freedom doesn't come when everything is fine. It comes when you no longer need it to be. And that's something only pain can teach. The mature soul doesn't ask for a path without obstacles. It asks for composure to walk through them. And once it gains that, everything changes. You stop chasing what doesn't depend on you. You stop begging for attention, justifying your worth, fighting for places that no longer belong to you. And in that instant, life, that same life that once seemed like an enemy, becomes your ally. Because clarity always arrives after the storm, never before. Seneca wrote, "The wise man does not grieve over what he has lost, but rejoices for what he has had." That gratitude is the final key. Because only those who give thanks can keep walking without resentment. Resentment ties you to the past. Gratitude frees you into the present. And no reconstruction is possible without inner freedom. So be grateful, even for what hurt you. Be grateful to the one who betrayed you. They taught you the value of loyalty. Be grateful to loss. It taught you the richness of detachment. Be grateful to failure. It revealed that dignity depends not on outcome, but on intention. Rebuilding your life isn't about raising a new wall. It's about learning to live without them. It's trusting again, even after being hurt. It's opening your hands again after keeping them clenched in fear. It's looking at the world again with curiosity when before you only saw it with suspicion. It's loving again, but consciously. Loving not from need, but from abundance. That's the difference between the soul that seeks and the soul that gives. And one day, without knowing how, you find yourself laughing again. Not because everything is fine, but because you've made peace with the fact that maybe it never will be completely. You've learned to find beauty in imperfection, calm in uncertainty, strength in fragility. That is spiritual maturity. That is reconstruction. Stoicism doesn't promise eternal happiness, it promises clarity. And clarity is worth more than euphoria. Because with clarity, you can make choices that don't destroy you. You can love without losing yourself, work without obsession, wait without despair. Clarity doesn't eliminate chaos, it arranges it within you. And when chaos finds order, the soul rests. Look back, but not to stay there. Look only to recognize how far you've come. You weren't weak, you were inexperienced. You weren't naive, you were pure. And though you may be more tired now, you're also wiser. Life broke you exactly where you needed to open. Not to humiliate you, but to shape you. Because what withstands fire purifies. And you have withstood. Stop searching for signs. Stop waiting for the universe to tell you you're ready. You've been ready since the moment you decided not to give up. You don't need more proof, your perseverance is proof enough. Now, keep walking, without looking back. Do it calmly, humbly, with the certainty that each step, however small, is building a new life. A life more yours, more conscious, more fair to yourself. And if one night you feel lost again, remember this. You don't need all the answers. You just need to remain faithful to virtue, to purpose, to your serenity. The rest will come naturally. Because the universe always responds to the mind that acts with clarity, not with haste, not with fear, but with coherence. This journey ends not in noise, but in silence. The silence of one who has understood that true victory is not in reclaiming what was, but in honoring what is. Breathe. You've arrived. And though the road continues, you are no longer the same as when you began. You are better, more grounded, more serene, more you. Because rebuilding from zero isn't starting over, it's starting awake. Your voice is essential here. Every reflection strengthens and elevates our community, reflecting the true value of each individual and contributing to our shared Stoic identity. The reflection that receives the most support will be set as the standard of this community of Stoic minds, a community that does not flee from pain but walks through it with courage, with wisdom, with honor. We will see each other in our next gathering at Stoicism for Winners, where we will continue exploring the riches of Stoic wisdom applied to modern life. Now, take the opportunity to deepen your Stoic practice with new recommended podcast sessions. Follow us so you don't miss any reflection that could help you at just the moment when everything feels overwhelming. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish episodes designed to accompany you when life feels heavy, when it's hard to stay calm, when you need a word to remind you who you are. Not following us is to risk missing exactly that lesson that could bring back the peace you have been seeking. Until we meet again, remember, you are the sole owner of your perception, the creator of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. This is the legacy of Stoicism, the art of being invincible.